and we had a more accurate inventory. And so how does that happen? Well, that happens because our strata are much better. They have less variability within them and more variability between them. And so this is a lot of statistics jargon. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff, but this is sort of the basics. And this is the method that we published to generate the strata. There were two kind of questions that we wanted to answer. One was, what's a good way to make these strata? Okay. And the other one was, how do we know what sized grid we should use? And maybe these are some questions that Sonoma County is interested in. I don't know if you've decided already if you're going to be gridding your data, but some of this work informs that. And I guess the broad brushstrokes of what we did is, first you fly the property and you collect data. Then you put it into layers, canopy height model, digital elevation model. You also have color infrared imagery. And then you take that data and combine it with an initial sample to develop models that relate your remote sensing data to the data you've collected in the field. And we also took that data and combined it with our sample to figure out what is the best size for the grid. We then created a final set of strata and sampled more intensely within that final set until we had a final inventory estimate. So what did that look like? Well, so now what I've done here is this is the final strata, and the lines are the old stand map. So the colors are all those individual grid cells colored, where green is less biomass or carbon, and pink is more. Okay, so like this here's a grassland, there's not much carbon, and this is an old growth Douglas fir area, so it has a lot of carbon. And you can see that the old stand map in places does a really good job of capturing the variability, right? But in other places, like this stand, there's pink, there's yellow, there's red. It didn't do a good job, and so by doing a better job of capturing the variability, we were able to use less plots. And so if I zoom in and look at a comparison, you can see here's the old stand map boundaries in black, and the grid cells here are the individual strata. And they do correspond roughly, but you can see that within this broader stand, there are some cells here that our new strata system says are different, and they get a different call. And there's a little bit of sort of georectification here, so it's a little bit offset, but it's much different than how people traditionally would think about making stands. Each one of these grid cells is theoretically a stand in a forest where we've typed it based on what's inside of it.
You said 10-meter cells?
They are 10th acre, so 66 feet, 20 meters
20
on a side, yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to skip over this. This is sort of the method we used to figure out what the best grid cell size was. And with that, I'm going to stop and say that was what we did on the Garcia River Forest. We found it to be really effective and powerful at reducing the sampling effort we needed to estimate what was in the woods. But when we looked at our next property that we're going to fly for inventory, we came to a totally different conclusion and used a very different method. So we're looking at the Big River Salmon Creek properties here. These are well-stocked Douglas fir and redwood properties, about 16,000 acres. This also is FSC and SFI certified, and it's also a carbon project, and we've been issued over 2 million CRTs. We haven't sold all of them, but we've sold a lot of them. And so this is a much different forest because as opposed to being what I would call high-graded, the Garcia River Forest was high-graded, where they went in and they found all the biggest trees and cut them. And so what was left was a relatively small forest without much variability. Whereas on the Big River Salmon Creek property, they did clear cuts in places. And as a result, when you look at the property, it just looks differently. And this is what the original stand map looks like, with a lot of plots just like before, over 2,000 plots, similar sampling design. But what we were thinking about is when we looked at this property, it just looked much different. And so when you look at this picture, what you're looking at here is, this is a very new clear cut. This was not our property, this is from a different publication. This is a new clear cut. This is a thin. This is an older clear cut. And when you look at that as a human being, you look at it in your eyes and you say, God, there's objects there. And so it doesn't really make sense to throw a grid on top of that, because the forest doesn't happen at 90-degree angles in nature. It doesn't happen. And so it would be better to use the sort of shapes that are out there already when you're trying to partition the variability of the forest. And so that motivated me to build another system to take our LiDAR data and remote sensing data and make stands. And so this is a really messy picture, but what you're looking at here, the sort of image in the background is what we call our canopy height model. The blue is taller trees, and you can kind of make out like individual trees. It's like, this is an individual tree. So this is probably a riparian corridor running through here of tall trees. Here's an old clear cut. You can kind of see it in here. That's what's on the bottom. And the black line is a 10th acre grid, just like we use on the Garcia black lines. And then the red kind of squiggly polygons are what we call micro stands. And they're made from the canopy height model. And the point of this picture is to say that there are some pretty clear boundaries here. You know, along a riparian corridor here, in this little clear-cut area, and if we just use these grid cells, we might miss that. And so by developing an object-based approach, we could, you know, tap into the structure of the forest a little bit better.
Is that e-cognition?
No, I built this myself.
Okay.
And so e-cognition does it really well and really nicely. And that is a really nice segue. So the question is, why build something new? And you know, to be honest, a big part of this was e-cognition is super expensive. And so if I did it myself, I could save that money. But I also added a critical twist. And so not to get into too much of these things, it gives our organization the opportunity, the ability to rapidly simulate a lot of different options in relatively quick amount of time. E-cognition is a little bit slower. It also lets us control the parameters that we care about. And the thing that allowed me to publish this method was that it uses this sort of what I call area dependency, where if you have a 2-acre stand and it's very different from its neighbor, it'll get merged to its neighbor. But if you have a 50-acre stand, it's probably not going to get merged. It's big enough. And so it's this idea that when you are building your stands, the size of the stand matters. And so you can probably do this in e-cognition, but I built it myself. So anyway, I know we're running out of time here, and I've had to skip through some stuff. The end result in both of these cases, one was this grid-based system, was we used half as many plots and achieved a more accurate inventory. Using the stand-based system, and this is the final answer, so to speak, where we use this new software that I developed to build stands from objects. We used a third as many plots and achieved more accurate results. And so that's sort of the take-home here, is if you have a clever way to partition the variability of your project, you can spend a lot less time in the field. And that's why the LiDAR is so powerful. And I'm sure you guys are going to be thinking a lot about how to best sample and leverage your LiDAR and remote sensing data. And then I guess to close, this is the Garcia River Forest with a different color shade, all those tiny little pixels. So the nice thing you can do is, if you do use a grid system, is you can then use the sort of object-based system and make stands from it. So I just ran my algorithm on our grid and combined similar cells from our grid. And so what I'm saying here is that there's actually, the grid system actually might have a little more flexibility. It has some advantages. Even though it doesn't match the boundaries of the real world very well, you can use this other system and build stands at a later date. So maybe there's some...
Like a zonal majority into your stands, is that what you did?
No, I used this sort of region merging approach. So you could do this a lot of ways. So anyway, let me just wrap up. I'm sorry I've gone almost all the way in, but so we've protected over 125,000 acres in the North Coast, and we're really proud of that. And we've worked with so many great partners, we could never have done it otherwise, and we're still learning a lot. The carbon market has allowed us to stay in the black. We get paid to grow trees, not cut them down. And without that, we would not have been able to make ends meet because the market crashed as soon as we got into, the timber market crashed as soon as we got into some of these properties. And the carbon money really was able to close the gap. And recently, our use of remote sensing data, particularly LiDAR, has really helped to reduce the sampling effort required to achieve highly accurate inventory estimates. And so with that, I guess I'll wrap up. Thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate all the questions.
Well, we're almost at the 1 o'clock hour, but I just really want to thank you, Jordan, for giving us an introduction to the Conservation Fund and the amazing work that you do. And I think we truly got a glimpse into 21st century technology being brought to bear on the ground and work toward curbing climate change effects. If you have time to stick around for a little bit, so you're free to take off, but if you want to stick around and ask Jordan some more questions, please feel free. We've got the room. So, thank you again.
Yeah.
So you talked about habitat at the very beginning, and is that a whole separate process, or is that included in all that?
Well, so if you're interested in habitat variables, then